Hello and welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I'm your host Deepak. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Jeffrey Rediger, a best-selling author, licensed physician, psychiatrist, and faculty member at Harvard Medical School, to today's podcast episode. It's truly an honor to have him with us, and I'm excited for what promises to be an insightful and inspiring conversation. With over 22 years of experience as the medical director of McLean SC and community affairs at McLean Hospital in Boston, Dr. Rediger also served as the chief of behavioral medicine at Good Samaritan Medical Center for many years. In addition to his medical and psychiatric expertise, he holds a Master of Divinity in theology and the philosophy of science from Princeton Theological Seminary. His pioneering research on remarkable recoveries from otherwise incurable or fatal illnesses has been featured on notable platforms such as Oprah Winfrey, Dr. Oz, and Anderson Cooper 360. A recipient of numerous awards for leadership and patient care, Dr. Rediger was also nominated for the National Bravewell Leadership Award. His widely acclaimed book, Cured, Strengthen Your Immune System and Heal Your Life, has been translated into 22 languages and is available in bookstores and online platforms. In this episode, Dr. Jeffrey Rediger offers valuable insights from his groundbreaking book, Cured, The Remarkable Science and Stories of Spontaneous Healing and Recovery. So without further delay, let's welcome Dr. Jeffrey Rediger to the podcast. Dr. Jeffrey, it's an honor and privilege to have you join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Rediger, your book, Cured, dwells into the concept of spontaneous healing. What inspired you to begin researching these miraculous recoveries? And how did your perspective as a psychiatrist influence your approach to studying them?
Well, it's a good question. There's a few ways in which I could address that. When I was a young medical director at McLean Hospital and on the faculty at Harvard, a nurse who worked in the oncology unit at Mass General Hospital in Boston came to me and asked for help discussing with her son that she had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I did that with her, but then she took off to a healing center and began writing me and calling me saying that she was getting better, she was healing. And I was very skeptical about that because pancreatic cancer is almost universally fatal and is a very terrible cancer to get, one of the worst kinds of cancer one can get. But she began eating steak and salad again. She began working through all of these issues around her desire to give up control and learn how to accept love and deal with past traumas in her life. And she began to get better. And so this was surprising to me, but I still was skeptical. I thought this was just a fluke. She then began having people call and write me from around the country and the world saying that they also had medical evidence for their recoveries, and did I want to take a look at their stories? I said no. I was busy. I was doing a lot of work in my early parts of my career, and so I declined. But the truth is, over the next year or so, as people sent me their medical files, I began to realize that although I could explain most of the stories from the standpoint of traditional science, I couldn't explain all of them. And these few files raised a lot of questions. So long and short of it is, in 2003, I began a formal study and I began to collect medical evidence and look into these stories more deeply. Now, at a personal level, there was also a lot going on for me too. I grew up in a very conservative religious family in Indiana on a farm. My father was Amish, which is a very conservative religious tradition. And I grew up in a very violent home. So I had a lot of questions and my own hurts. And I was trying to figure out what's true about spirituality, what's true about science, what's true about what healing requires at the deepest levels of the mind and the heart. And I knew something was missing in medicine. And so that's how the journey began.
One of the key themes in your book is the mind-body connection. Can you explain how our mental state influences our physical health and how you have seen this play out in your research?
Yes. So that's a really good question. You know, at one level, one could say that love heals. at another level, we can't just say that, because we can't just uh, say we're going to love ourselves or love others. We have to remove the blocks, both conscious and unconscious, that get in the way of our ability to give and receive love. I've become interested in this concept of limbic resonance. And the limbic part of our brain is where our emotions live. And this is where we develop attachment. This is where we attach as babies to our mothers and our fathers and people who are our caretakers growing up. Well, that's all well and good if it's a safe and healthy environment. But if the person that we are attaching to and learning to give and receive love from as a young child is unsafe and cruel to us or violent with us, then our limbic system learns to attach to unsafe people. And what happens as we grow up then is that our emotional selves recognize familiarity with unsafe people. And so we tend to attract and attach to people who are unsafe. And that feels familiar to us. And so our nervous systems get turned upside down. And that's associated with a lot of health conditions, because children who have a lot of trauma end up having a lot of disease burden when they grow up. And a lot of the diseases have become, we now understand, to be related to childhood trauma. So adverse childhood experiences is highly predictive of the burden of adult diseases. And I could explain more about that if that would be useful. But I've become very interested in the ways in which we learn to love as children and attach as children. If it's to unsafe people, then we choose unfamiliar people, or we choose unsafe people when we're older. So safe people are registered in our nervous system as unsafe, and unsafe people are registered in our nervous systems as safe. And that creates so many problems for the mind-body issue. And so for people who I've studied who learn to love, who learn to give up their blockages so they can give and receive love and experience their value as human beings and their dignity as human beings at a deep level, that's very healing. And sometimes the body responds in shocking ways in its improvement.
Very insightful. Dr. Rediger, you mentioned that doctors are often skeptical of spontaneous healing. Why do you think the medical community tends to overlook or dismiss these extraordinary recoveries? And how can this attitude change?
Well, I think the truth is the West needs the East and the East needs the West. Science is important, and the wisdom traditions of what's been studied and understood for thousands of years in India and Japan and China and elsewhere is really important for understanding. So we really need both traditions to enrich our understanding of the depth. Science is something that is important and is a tool for uncovering knowledge. But let's face it, science as it's currently practiced is really about 18th century biology and physics. It hasn't really kept up to date with modern advancements in science, with quantum physics and all that. And it's going to take us a long time to really come to terms with the depth of what quantum physics is saying. It's mind-blowing. And so to really understand that in a granular way and in a reproducible way is going to take more time in our development as human beings. So science is important in the way we understand it in Western countries, but it's also limited. As a physician, I was taught to make a diagnosis and start a medication, but we don't really study how people heal. And so this era that's just beginning, where we actually study how people heal rather than just make a diagnosis and start a medication, that presages a really different future. And so I'm just really feel privileged and grateful to the patients I study, because they're really the Olympians of health and well-being. They're the flagship for a new kind of science and a new kind of medicine. And that's why their stories and their medical files are really important.
You explore the idea that creating an environment conducive to healing is crucial. What are
Yes.
some of the specific physical and mental factors that play a role in promoting healing from within?
Well, there's a lot to that. And it's a little bit different for every person, but there are patterns that are universal in this that are true from person to person, even though the details might vary. For example, nutrition is important, but it's also true that different kinds of nutrition work better for different people. I think the Western diet is cancer creating and disease creating in many ways. I have a friend who's a physician who grew up in Greece, and they have an organic olive farm there, and he described the tragedy that's unfolding there because for hundreds of years, the Mediterranean diet has been an important way of life for many people in the Greek islands, etc. But now in Athens, it's cool to have cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke. And unfortunately, the rates of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, lung disease, and autoimmune illness are skyrocketing as a result of that in Athens. And that's similar to what's going on in many parts of the world. Some people respond really well to a plant-based diet. Most of the people I studied did decrease the amount of meat, but they didn't always eliminate it. Some people did use the keto diet, but what almost everybody I studied did was they eliminated a lot of the processed foods and a lot of the foods that are very inflammatory in their content. And so they got rid of sugar. In the United States, 100 years ago, the average American consumed 4 pounds of sugar, not a big deal. In modern day times, the average American consumes 154 pounds of sugar a year, and our bodies just are not made to take that in. These little sugar granules course through our bloodstream at such a high level of concentration, and they make little cuts on the inside of our arteries and create these little incisions that then our beautiful immune system comes in and repairs. But after a while, it becomes repair upon repair upon repair of these layers of scars. That's called atherosclerosis. We have treated that with anti-cholesterol medications, but that just treats the symptoms and not the deeper causes. So eliminating a lot of the sugar, eliminating a lot of the refined flours that are like sugar, a lot of the enriched flours, those are ways in which people can become more healthy and have a less inflammatory diet that's less disease creating. So there's a lot to that. People also need to feel safe. They need to deal with their past traumas. They need to have a path spiritually and psychologically that helps them experience their dignity and value and equality as human beings and stand up for their rights. These kinds of things are very life-giving for the immune system.
Dr. Jeffrey, how do stress, trauma, and identity play into the healing process? And what steps can people take to heal on these levels?
Yes, that's really a good question. So if we are marinating our beautiful immune cells in stress hormones 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we know on the basis of good science that those immune cells will become erratic, they will become sluggish, and they will become confused, and they will start to attack the body that they're sworn to protect instead of going after the pathogen that needs to be eliminated. And so not being in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn all the time is important. And that's difficult in modern life, right? And so we need to find ways to relax. It's also true that when we make genuine contact with each other, when our eyes make contact and we smile and an authentic connection is made, that activates the vagus nerve, which deactivates the stress responses. That deactivates the fight, flight responses that many of us live so much of our lives in.
Dr. Rediger, you have studied cases of people recovering from what were considered terminal illnesses.
Yes.
Are there common denominators or patterns you have identified among these individuals that others could apply to their own healing journey?
Yes. Yeah. So I studied the Olympians of health and well-being, right? I mean, these people have recovered from absolutely incurable illnesses. But what's really exciting for me is we now know that 85% of the illnesses from which people suffer are lifestyle related. They are lifestyle diseases like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, lung disease, autoimmune illness. And the tragedy is that every day we treat them as if they're incurable because that's what we've been taught. We've been taught as physicians to make a diagnosis and start a medication, but we can help people experience their value, heal their identities, change their nutrition, change their lifestyle, set new boundaries in their relationships with others so they're not always so stressed. These kinds of things make a huge difference. So we might not all do what these Olympians of health and well-being have done. These have gone way beyond in their efforts. But if we apply just some of what these Olympians of health and well-being have applied in their lives, then I know that we can experience a real improvement in our well-being, a decrease in many of the physical symptoms and the pain that people carry, and have a much more vital, flourishing life and more connected with ourselves and others. And so that's why I think this kind of work is really important.
A central point of your book is the role of nutrition in healing.
Yes.
Can you talk more about the link between diet and immunity and what changes people can make to enhance their overall health?
Yes. And again, this varies a little bit from person to person. Some of the people I studied did not change their nutrition, and I think they could have eaten cat food and still gotten better. So it's not really about the food. Food is love, right? Food is what we share in community with others. It's how we share our pleasure and our connections with others. And so, yes, nutrition is important, but the deeper factors around connection and affiliation with others is more important. There's this famous study about Roseto, Pennsylvania. And decades ago, doctors noticed that people who lived in this tiny Italian immigrant community just didn't have a lot of heart disease, and they seemed to live long, healthy lives. And so they wanted to understand why these people were so much healthier than everybody else. So they went in to study them and expected to find that people were probably eating really healthy foods and doing all the right things. What turns out, they were smoking cigars, they were frying their meat in lard and butter, they were drinking wine, they were doing all the wrong things, but they didn't have much cardiovascular disease at all because they really lived in community with each other. They shared a lot of love with each other. They sat on the front porches. They were very connected as a community to each other. And that offset all the unhealthy foods they were eating. So yes, nutrition is really important. 88% of the people that I studied did become vegetarian, but not everybody did. So it's just important to understand that there's deeper factors in our minds and our hearts that give us vitality and health that are not just about the food that we eat. Sometimes people who eat the healthiest diets and do the healthiest things are sometimes some of the sickest people that I study because they are so stressed or their relationships are in such terrible shape that they are constantly stressed and they think there's something wrong about them or not good enough about them. Those factors are weighing them down a lot. So these deeper changes and healing we need to take can't be ignored.
Dr. In Cured, you talk about the power of our immune system. How can we better support and strengthen our immune system to not only heal but also prevent illness?
Yeah, our immune system is this brilliant army of highly specialized cells that go out and protect us in our bodies in all kinds of ways. So anything that decreases inflammation in our body, anything that helps us move in the direction of an anti-inflammatory lifestyle is really important. So anti-inflammatory foods is important, but an anti-inflammatory lifestyle is important too. That's why certain kinds of spirituality that help us experience our value and get out of these states of constant tension and stress is really important. Eliminating the beliefs that we aren't good enough or that we're too much, doing the work on our shadow sides where we begin to face the ways in which we've harmed ourselves and others. These kinds of psychological and spiritual journeys are really important to healing our bodies.
The book suggests that healing our identity may be one of the most powerful tools for recovery. Can you elaborate on how our identity impacts both our physical and mental health and what people can do to foster a healthier sense of self?
Yes. So I'm a psychiatrist, and so I've been watching people's stories for decades now and finding what it means to go into these deeper parts of the conscious and unconscious mind and help us heal. I think when these people I study, I mean, they will, I'll interview them and they'll tell me about the changes they made in their immune system and healing the chronic inflammation. They'll tell me about the nutritional changes they made, the changes they made around how to activate the vagus nerve and get out of fight or flight all the time. But when they get a light in their eyes and sit up and really want me to understand the deeper healing that they experienced, they talk about what it means to heal their relationship with themselves and to understand their value as human beings, what it means to not feel like they're better than others, not feel like they're worse than others, but to really recognize our common humanity and realize that we all have dignity and value, and none of us are too much, we're not too little, we all bring something of sacred dignity into the world. And to experience that in a way that we really experience it, not just in our heads, but in our hearts, that's been the journey that I feel so privileged to get to follow these amazing human beings on. And that's why they say that in the end they are so grateful for their illness, because that's the gift that it gave them, was this new experience of themselves in the world. And that's people get really emotional when they talk about that. And so that's the deeper story of all of this.
Dr. Rediger, my last question.
Yes.
You introduced the concept that miracles might not be as impossible as we think, and that they might be rooted in science. How do you
Yes.
define a miracle in the context of your research, and how can we apply this understanding to everyday health and healing practices?
Yeah, so miracles used to be defined in the dictionary as things that happened outside of science. I think what's true is miracles happen outside of our current conceptions of science and knowledge. And so that's why we need to study them, because it turns out that whether a miracle happens in 5 minutes or 5 years, it's the same pattern that's unfolding around a person experiencing their value, shedding their false beliefs, and waking up to the deeper story of who they really are and who we all are. And so I think it's important to understand that science is evolving, our models are improving. Quantum physics has been around now for 80 years, and it's not a theory. It's a proven scientific fact that this world that we see and touch is actually an illusion at a deeper level. And even though it's the world we live in, and even though it's true at one level, at a deeper level, this table that is in front of us, this chair that we are sitting on, they present and feel and look true to the evidence of the 5 senses. But at a deeper level, there are a few really, really tiny particles that are spread at massive distance from each other. And since they're vibrating in constant resonance with each other, this chair and table look and feel solid. There's a whole deeper level around all of that goes on that we don't really know how to understand yet. And it's going to take us some time. And that's science. That's a new science. But we are in the very early stages of knowing how to improve our scientific models to take into account the deeper stretch of the mind and the heart. What is great is that the digital world is helping bring quantum physics into our daily life with apps, with sensors in the environment, and these are starting to reframe our understanding of the mind and the body and the relationship to each other. And that's going to, over the decades, transform the way we understand all of this and help us have a much better science than we currently have. And that will help us understand miracles better too.
Listeners, to wrap up, I want to express my deepest gratitude to Dr. Jeffrey Rediger for joining us today. His expertise, passion, and commitment to exploring the remarkable power of healing have truly made this conversation enlightening. Dr. Rediger's work challenges our understanding of medicine and recovery, and his insights are not only thought-provoking but also deeply inspiring. I hope this discussion has sparked new perspective on health, healing, and the mind-body connection. Thank you everyone listening, and I encourage you to dive deeper into Dr. Rediger's groundbreaking book, Cured, which continues to inspire and empower people around the world. Thank you, Dr. Jeffrey Rediger, for joining with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's really nice to meet you.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.